Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also, share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. Quarter to 2 in the morning, the strangest time, when the brain stubbornly refuses to sleep and reality takes on midnight harshness. Jacob Wilson, a 38-year-old engineer from Michigan, sat on the couch in his dimly lit living room, surrounded by the soft orange glow of his desk lamp. The iced coffee had long since lost its taste, but he stubbornly took one sip after another, as if hoping that the bitterness of the drink would go away somewhere. In truth, he cursed those evenings when insomnia drove him into the vastness of social networks. Scrolling the feed and disconnecting from thoughts about work was his habit, which rarely brought relief, but the hope never died. And this time, it seemed, silence and sleeplessness conspired to deal him the most painful blow that life could come up with. He was scrolling through X, the former Twitter, now filled with anonymous accounts and strange viral videos that appeared out of nowhere. Jacob's fingers froze as a new notification appeared on the screen. New video. Party. Very personal. Some kind of spam again, he thought, but half asleep, curiosity overpowered common sense. He pointed to the playlist, and the rhythms of loud music, multicolored lights, and people's faces, distorted by strobe flashes, poured across the phone's entire screen. The cameraman filmed clumsily. The camera either rose to the ceiling or fell at the feet of the dancers. As the seconds ticked by, Jacob's heart beat evenly and slightly sluggish, like someone who doesn't expect any drama in this short video. But suddenly the camera caught a couple in the center of the dance floor. The woman, young, with bare shoulders, pressed herself against the man, and in the way she moved in his arms, there was no usual social constraint. Everything was too intimate. In the dim light of the lamp, Jacob felt a spasm in his chest. The woman in the video had a butterfly tattoo, exactly the same one he had seen for many years on the wrist of his wife, Caitlin. It was as if an invisible switch had flicked inside him. It can't be her, he thought at first. He turned his gaze to the details: a short dark bob with golden strands, a chiseled profile. But when the woman turned to the camera and her face was illuminated by a strobe light, there was no doubt left. It was Caitlin. A smile, a look, a familiar curve of the neck over 15 years of marriage, he learned her features by heart. His brain brought panic and pain to the forefront. This is my wife, but when was this even filmed? The shooting date and some kind of mark flashed on the screen. The video was posted recently, but filmed 3 years ago. In the video, Caitlin laughed, looked into the stranger's eyes, and said something in his ear, while the man's palm lay too loosely on her lower back. Meanwhile, the cameraman continued filming. You could still see people around, whose faces appeared in the frame from time to time, all happy and slightly drunk. Jacob bit his lip, feeling his throat tighten. No, it's a dream. It's a stupid joke. He pressed play again and again until the video turned into a looping nightmare for him. Shrill music flowed from the phone speaker, and on the screen the world continued to exist in which his wife had long lived a different life. Numb, he automatically put down his coffee cup so that it almost fell on the carpet. When did this happen? He asked himself. It seems like 3 years ago she went on a business trip to Chicago, said that there were nightly presentations, clients. Then a wave of either rage or horror rose inside him. It turns out she was lying. It was not just a dinner with a client, but... Jacob rested his hands on his knees and tried to compose himself. I had to figure out if it was fake. But is it really possible to fake her every feature, every movement, that familiar manner of tilting her head? A tattoo that was dedicated to their youth? No, it's definitely her. I wanted to scream so that someone in the whole house would respond and say, "You were mistaken, this is not your Caitlin." But the house was asleep, and only he, alone and broken, sat in the living room, where the dark corners suddenly seemed hostile. The gaze fell on a framed family photo standing on the bookshelf. There Caitlin hugs her children, 10-year-old Lucas and 7-year-old Emily, and Jacob stands next to him, laughing at the camera. The photo was taken just a couple of months ago, on a sunny summer day when they went to the lake for a picnic. It would seem like a complete family. "And when did you manage to turn into a stranger to me?" flashed through his head. A couple of times he almost threw the phone into the wall, as if it were the culprit of this nightmare. But his hands trembled treacherously, and he realized that he couldn't just throw away the evidence. He felt like he needed to gather all his thoughts together, check if there were other confirmations, but his head was buzzing like an upside-down beehive. Somewhere nearby, on the floor above, a door quietly creaked, and he caught footsteps on the second floor. Caitlin must have woken up. His heart almost jumped out of his chest. "She doesn't know what I saw. What should I do?" But the footsteps died down. She probably just went to the bathroom and returned to the bedroom. Jacob realized that sleep would not come today. He put the phone on the table and stared at the wall. The thought throbbed in my head, "Lord, how to live on." But instead of answers, only fragments of memories came about how he and Caitlin met back in school, how she was his first love, how he proposed to her by the lake, and then his best friend played at their wedding. This whole happy story suddenly lost its reality. The beat of my own heart echoed in my ears. He wanted to cry, but the tears seemed to have frozen. He continued to sit in silence, and the video remained on the phone screen, like a diabolical confirmation that his past had turned into a deception. Closer to dawn, he got up, pulled on a sweater, and went out onto the porch. The street was deserted. The cool early morning air ruffled his hair. A dog was heard barking from somewhere in the neighboring yard. Jacob listened to his own breathing, as if he was trying to return to his body after a strong shock. "I have to find out everything," he firmly decided, peering into the graying sky. After all, this one video is just the tip of the iceberg. Perhaps there is a whole series of lies that he was not even aware of. He grinned sadly, exhaling a cloud of steam. "Caitlin, what are you doing to our family?" As the sun began to slowly rise over the roofs, Jacob entered the house. The kids had to go to school, and he had to maintain a semblance of normalcy, at least for a while. He understood. The next evening would come, and he would have to make a decision on what to do next. But for now, the main thing is not to give yourself away. And in this absolutely crushing silence, he realized that his life was now divided into before and after. The after was just beginning, and the fear of it was almost unbearable, as if before jumping into an abyss without a parachute. When morning came and the children, Lucas and Emily, ran into the kitchen, Jacob tried to put on a casual smile. Caitlin, standing at the stove, was frying pancakes, while babbling something about how the boss asked her to urgently come early today. On a normal day, Jacob would have joked, moving up the corporate ladder again. But now he simply remained silent. The kids brought the usual morning noise with them. Lucas loudly talking about how he dreamed of an incredible basketball game where he was a superstar, and Emily chirping about a project for art class. Caitlin took a moment to look at her husband and frowned. "Did you sleep well? You look like a man who has been carrying bags of cement all night." He choked on a sip of coffee, trying to remain calm. "Yes, insomnia," he answered briefly. "Projects, calculations, I don't know myself." He felt an unpleasant bitterness rise up in his throat, because the mere mention of her work now hurt his ears. "Are you sure everything is okay?" she asked, softening her voice. "Yes, everything is fine," he snapped, trying not to meet her gaze. Suddenly, he noticed how she automatically straightened her sleeve, and that same butterfly tattoo flashed. That night, watching the video, he realized how much was hidden behind that little drawing they had once made together, inspired by youthful romance. A sharp desire to ask, "Don't you want to tell me what happened 3 years ago?" tongue stabbed, but he restrained himself because the children could hear. After finishing making the pancakes, Caitlin turned to Emily. "Honey, don't forget to take the box of markers that I bought you yesterday. There are some sparkly shades for your poster." Emily jumped up and down happily. "Hooray, I'll show everyone at school." Lucas looked out from behind his plate. "Mom, will you come to my training today?" The coach said parents could watch. Sorry, baby, it won't work. She hesitated for a split second. I have a lot to do at work. I'll be late. Again, Lucas sighed. Okay. Jacob clutched the cup until his knuckles turned white. Anger rose inside him. What's going on at work? With whom? Where will she rush again, if not to train her son? But he remained silent. The children began to put their textbooks in their backpacks, shouting over each other. Lucas made fun of Emily, pretending that he wanted to hide her new markers. She screamed and tried to snatch them. Be careful, Jacob reprimanded them loudly, causing instant silence. The children looked at each other, and Caitlin frowned. You're so tense today. Sorry. Nerves, he answered quietly. When the children finally left to get ready, Caitlin walked closer to her husband and put her hand on his shoulder. Maybe you should still take a vacation, as you've been planning for a long time. To relax, get some sleep. He literally felt the blood in his veins turn icy at her touch. We'll see, he said and pulled away, as if by accident. I'll think about it. Okay? She sighed, and something like resentment or misunderstanding flashed in her eyes. If anything, I can make you some herbal tea for the night. Usually these words used to sound caring, but now they irritated me with their feigned ordinariness. It was time to take the kids to school, and Caitlin picked up the keys to her car. Jacob tried not to let his gaze linger on her. As soon as the door closed behind them, he felt a trembling literally run through him. God, how can I bear this, pretending that everything is fine, he thought. But he saw no choice. Before he blew everything up, he needed evidence. He couldn't just blurt out in front of the kids, "Your mom has been lying to us all these years," without clear evidence or a plan for what would happen next. Alone, sitting at the kitchen table where half-eaten pancakes were still standing, he remembered every business trip absence of Caitlin, every time she was late from work. Deep down, he admitted that there were times when he noticed her detachment or heard unconvincing explanations, but he pushed away the anxiety, assuring himself that it was paranoia. A shadow falling on a ray of sunlight slid across the tabletop, and it seemed to him that all the comfort of their home had suddenly become false. He was about to go to work, but realized that he was not able to concentrate on the drawings and leading the work crew right now. He needed to start his own investigation. Okay, he muttered to himself, let's see if she has an old phone or laptop that could contain something. I remembered Caitlin had an old iPhone, which she used before buying a new one with Face ID protection, and it seems she never changed the password on the old one. Before starting the search, he looked away at the family photo. Caitlin was there smiling. How bright and dear you were to me, he thought, feeling a painful emptiness in his soul. But this was not the time to cry. He straightened his back, suppressed the trembling in his hands, and went to check the bedside tables, drawers, wherever equipment of yesteryear could be stored. Feeling like the hero of a cheap detective story, he still realized that this was his reality. And with every minute, the anxiety only grew. The old iPhone was found in the bottom drawer of the dresser, wrapped in a charging cable and lying among some discs and old USB flash drives. When Jacob pressed the button, the screen lit up miraculously. The charge level was about 30%. The heart was beating so hard that it seemed like it could be heard in the next room. He swiped the unlock screen, and it actually opened without asking for a password. Thank you for your carelessness, Caitlin, he thought gloomily, feeling like a traitor and at the same time realizing that someone else had betrayed him. Messages. He began leafing through them, starting with the oldest archive. Most of the correspondence was harmless or long abandoned. School chats, conversations with friends, family discussions about holidays. But after a few minutes of searching, he came across the name Rick, which had fairly recent dates next to it in recent messages. He opened the dialogue. Replicas with context immediately began to jump before his eyes, which made it seem like a grenade exploded in his chest. Rick, a week ago. We managed to book a room as discussed. I can't wait to see you. Caitlin, thank you for taking care of everything. Just make sure no one guesses. Rick, Certainly, be careful out there at home. Jacob's inner world cracked. This means that this is not the past, 3 years ago, it is happening right now. A week ago, she made an appointment. The image of his son, who called his mother to practice, and his wife, who said, "I'm busy," flashed in his head. He squeezed the phone so hard that he almost cracked the case. I scrolled further through the conversation. There were also old messages, sometimes with obvious hints of intimacy, sometimes about a corporate event where we will again find a moment for ourselves. Up until a few months ago, she was texting this Rick messages like, "I love it when we run out of meetings into an empty office," and "I can't wait for Friday." Friday was the day she supposedly worked late or flew to another city. Lord, how many times has this been repeated? He groaned mentally. It only got worse. One of the threads of this correspondence hinted that Rick was actually Richard Cole, her boss. Jacob couldn't believe his eyes. Does this mean that Caitlin's boss has been having an affair with her for a long time, taking advantage of the fact that she is his subordinate? There was a suffocating feeling that in the office where she went there was a whole performance going on, where everyone knew everything, and he alone remained in the dark. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he continued to study the phone. The photos section was full of ordinary shots: children, family holidays, work meetings. But some of the pictures aroused suspicion: evening landscapes from different cities, check-ins at hotels where, according to Caitlin, she had never been at all. He came across receipts she had mailed to herself from hotel addresses. The dates there overlapped with business trips. At the same time, the amounts for a double room, and all without a hint of the presence of other colleagues. "Damn," he muttered, feeling his insides grow cold. His fingers trembled as he took screenshots and sent them to his email. He understood that he was crossing all moral boundaries, but what choice did he have? At some point, he felt physically ill. His throat constricted, he wanted to throw away the phone and run away, hiding from the truth. But he forced himself to continue. Finally, when he was sure he had gathered enough evidence, he put the phone down, wiped the sweat from his brow with his palm, and stood up unsteadily. "So, deceptions, hotels, other people's hugs," he whispered, "and apparently it continues to this day." He remembered that video from 3 years ago. It turns out that it all started even earlier than he thought. How could he be so blind? Turning around, he saw a reflection in the mirror, a man with a haunted look, his eyes red from lack of sleep and stress. "It's me," he noted with a bitter smile. Just yesterday, he was an almost happy father who was only worried about the next report at work. The mood fluctuated between rage and horror. "I wanted to throw out all of Caitlin's things and burn them. But what will this change? Children still deserve a mother, a father, and some form of normal life." Feeling an urgent need to vent, he dialed his older sister Julie's number. She lived in another state, they communicated infrequently, but he knew that she was a family psychologist and was always ready to listen to him. "Hi, Jules," he said when he heard her voice on the phone. "Can you talk now?" "Yes, Jake, of course. What happened?" "I have problems with Caitlin," the voice broke. "I found out that she was cheating on me. She has been having an affair with her boss, apparently for a long time." There was a pause on the other end. Then a rustling sound was heard. Apparently Julie had gone to a quiet place. "Sorry, I didn't expect," she said quietly. "You are sure?" "I'm 100% sure," he answered through clenched teeth. "I have the evidence in my hands. Videos, correspondence, checks. It's horrible." Julie didn't interrupt. She let him talk. When he finished speaking haltingly, she said, "God, Jake, I feel so bad for you. But I beg you, don't take any sudden steps. Children." "I know," he responded, softening his voice at the mention of children. "I fear for them most of all. If you decide to get a divorce, do everything correctly. Don't let your emotions burn the ground under your feet. I will be there to help you in any way I can, even from a distance." After hanging up, he felt a strange relief in his soul. At least someone knew the truth. At least someone believed him without judging him. My sister advised me to act in a balanced manner and not to act recklessly. But he understood he would have to move on, perhaps hire a lawyer and prepare for war, because Caitlin was unlikely to voluntarily agree to the collapse of the family. A new feeling flared up inside, cold determination. To sort everything out, collect even more evidence, and then present it to her in such a way that there is no chance of getting away with it. And this thought seemed to him the only thread that he could cling to in the absolute chaos that had befallen his life. The next morning, Jacob called work and said he would be taking a couple of days off for personal reasons. His boss, an understanding and not too picky person, simply said, "Of course, Jake, get your affairs in order. If anything happens, we can handle it." For Jacob, this meant he had time to tackle the most painful investigation of his life. He started with the bank statements and credit reports that Caitlin kept in a locked drawer. All these years, they didn't really hide their spending from each other, although they each had their own card, but they didn't look deeply into other people's accounts. Now it became for him something like a carefully constructed system of evidence. Sitting at the dining room table, he arranged pieces of paper by date, marking special transactions. Here is the payment at the Rosewood Inn, although Caitlin claimed that she was then in Los Angeles for a conference. Here is dinner for two in an expensive restaurant, while at home she said that she was eating something quick because there was a rush. Sheet by sheet, he sank deeper and deeper, realizing that the deception lasted not a couple of months, but years. He found 3-year-old receipts from another motel near Detroit that suspiciously matched the party video. So, so it wasn't just about this year that she was lying, he muttered under his breath. Years, 3 years, maybe more. My heart sank at the thought that a conscientious husband, he sometimes scolded himself for the missing $50 in the family account, and she spent hundreds on secret walks. At the same time, he started searching on social networks. He checked Caitlin's personal profile on X, her pages on other networks, as well as closed groups in which she might be a member. Surprisingly, some of Caitlin's colleagues posted photos from corporate parties where she was next to her boss, Richard Cole. In most of the photos, they stood side by side, smiling, sometimes very close, almost touching each other. That's where everything is in plain sight, Jacob thought gloomily, and no one bothered to give me a hint. Deep down, he understood that his colleagues probably did not consider it necessary, or they had their own reasons for remaining silent. Hour after hour, he sat in his pajamas, without leaving the house, collecting an increasingly sinister picture from scraps of information. By lunchtime, he already had a decent dossier, screenshots, printed receipts, extracts from instant messengers. He felt not like a deceived husband, but like an accountant who carefully balances illegal transactions. From time to time, he wanted to throw these papers in the trash and just run wherever he could. But thoughts of Lucas and Emily stopped him. I have to finish this to protect them, or at least explain why our lives will collapse. In the evening, he took a break. He didn't even have the strength to read another receipt. He decided to check the mailbox by the door, the one where forgotten envelopes were sometimes found. Among the pile of promotional brochures was one envelope addressed to Caitlin. It said something like legal notice. "You never know," he muttered, bringing the correspondence into the house. "Maybe some kind of bill." But inside was a legal document from Brightwave Media's HR department, which confirmed Caitlin's participation in some kind of corporate project dated 3 months ago, again on the very days when she was supposedly in Chicago. So it wasn't an out-of-state trip, she was here, participating in something local, he thought, checking the information. But she told me it was in Chicago. He was filled with a mixture of feelings: disgust, anger, regret. One of the lines in the document stated that the project team was managed by Vice President R. Cole. Great, everything fits, he smiled with bitter irony. Wonderful. For the first time, he thought that perhaps Brightwave Media was also to blame for all this. After all, if Richard Cole is a big boss, it means someone turned a blind eye to his relationship with a subordinate. At a minimum, The HR department should have noticed some signals, official correspondence, and joint expenses. It's not just treason, he muttered. This is a whole tangle in which other people are involved. But so far he did not know what to do with this discovery. It seemed too big to drag to court. Still, the thought of a potential lawsuit against the company that condoned it was already looming in his mind. He went to the refrigerator to get a bottle of water, noticing Emily's drawing on the wall along the way, "My family." There were 4 figures, Dad, Mom, Lucas, and Emily herself, all holding hands against a background of green grass and blue sky. This brought tears to his eyes. He placed his palm on the drawing, as if stroking his daughter through the paper. How can I tell her that Mom no longer lives with us, that we are getting a divorce? He tilted his head back and took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. He still has decisions to make. At the end of the day, he put all the collected materials into a folder and put it in his work briefcase. He understood that when the time came to show this evidence, he would be ready, as if preparing for a battle, but not with some abstract enemy, but with a man whom he had loved for 15 years. The feeling of bitterness did not go away, but another thing was added to it: cold rationality. He made himself some strong tea, sat down in the living room, and began to look out the window at the setting sun. This is just the beginning, he thought. The coolness of the evening penetrated through the glass, reminding us that there was a whole world beyond the threshold, and that it had an unfulfilled mission. But he decided that he would talk to a lawyer tomorrow. You cannot put off what is already knocking on the door of fate. Jacob found the divorce shark, Marge Henderson, through a couple of articles in the local press. She became famous for winning cases, even against large corporations. They feared her for her toughness and called her a bulldog in a skirt. But to him, it sounded just right. He made an appointment for 10 a.m., and on the way to her office, he drove the car with his heart pounding. I can't believe I'm going to see a divorce lawyer. The office was located on the 20th floor of a respectable building in the center of Detroit. The interior of the reception area was striking in its laconic luxury: marble floor, leather chairs, dim lighting. The secretary greeted him with a smile and invited him to go to Marge. She turned out to be a short woman of about 50, with neat silver locks, a strict trouser suit, and her eyes were tenacious, like a hawk. "Mr. Wilson," she said firmly, shaking his hand. "Take a seat. Tell me what happened." Jacob exhaled heavily, trying not to lose heart under that direct gaze. He opened his briefcase and laid out a stack of papers, screenshots, and printouts on the table. "My wife has been cheating on me for a long time," he began. "She's having an affair with her boss, and I think there were other men there. I have proof. And..." He paused when he realized there was a lump in his throat. "I want a divorce." Marge nodded, taking his printouts into her hands. She ran her eyes over them very quickly, sometimes holding her gaze, and made short notes with a pencil in a notebook. "And you need maximum protection of your interests, right? Do you have children?" she asked. "2 children," he nodded. "Lucas, 10 years old, and Emily, 7. I want them to stay with me. Caitlin, I don't want to take away her right to see them, but I should have primary custody. Understand? A mother's betrayal can influence a court's decision, but not always in a decisive way." Marge raised an eyebrow. "You will need to prove that this will be better for the children." "I know," he answered tensely. "But damn, she wasn't just lying to me, she was lying to the kids, saying she was working late, when in fact she was at the hotel with her lover." "This is a powerful argument," the lawyer agreed, "especially if you show that she put personal intrigues above family responsibilities." She put the printouts aside and crossed her arms on the table. "Besides, I see the potential for a lawsuit against the company where she works. If her affair with her boss was covered up by management, this creates room for claims. Are you interested?" "The company is called Brightwave Media," Jacob explained, wincing at the mere mention of the name. "I suspect they knew, and her boss, Richard Cole, took advantage of his position." "Great," Marge said quietly, even with some enthusiasm in her voice. From experience, I can say that a claim against such companies sometimes provides good compensation for moral damage, especially if we prove that their corporate ethics were a sham and your wife's infidelity directly affected your family. I don't just want money, he said sharply, and his face turned purple. I want justice. Justice comes in different guises, the lawyer retorted. Money is just one of them. Marge scrolled further. So, a video from a party where she dances with another. It's easy to recognize your wife on her face. This is strong evidence, but it will be necessary to confirm the date, the context. I have other confirmations, he said, pushing new sheets of paper. Correspondence, receipts. She quickly scanned everything. Yes, you have seriously prepared. Mr. Wilson, are you sure you want to go all the way? This could become a high-profile case. All these details will come out in court. The press may seize on it. Children can also be affected by the hype. Jacob closed his eyes, trying to push away the painful images of the newspapers writing about his family and Lucas and Emily being confronted with that information. But he knew that stepping back meant giving Caitlin the opportunity to continue. I have to do it, he answered quietly. I want the court to see the truth, and so that my children do not live in a lie. Okay, Marge nodded, pursing her lips. Then I will begin to prepare a package of documents for filing a claim for divorce with special circumstances adultery. At the same time, let's consider the lawsuit against Brightwave. She stood up from the table, signaling that the meeting was over. In parting, she shook his hand, uttering words that he would never forget. It won't be easy, Mr. Wilson. But if you are confident, I will do everything possible to keep you and the children safe. Be prepared for the fact that your wife may respond with counter-accusations. I'm ready, he said, although inside he felt that there was no readiness, there was only despair. As he left the office and took the elevator down into the noisy lobby, he felt for a moment that his heart was beating too loudly, drowning out the sounds of the city. He grabbed the doorknob, pushed it, and felt the wind on his face. That's it, the path has been chosen, he thought, heading to the car. Ahead was practically a march to war, protecting children, fighting with his wife, scandal with her employer. He didn't know if he would ever be happy again, but at least now it was clear that he would not allow himself to be trampled on. Jacob spent the next few days waiting for the moment when he could talk to Caitlin in person without the children, without prying ears. He felt the tension in the air. She walked around the house like it was a minefield, apparently guessing that he was dissatisfied with something, but had no idea how deep it was. That evening, after Lucas and Emily had fallen asleep, he walked into the living room, where Caitlin was sitting with her laptop on her lap. She was texting someone or scrolling through social networks, it doesn't matter. He sank heavily into the chair opposite. We need to talk, he said, trying to keep his voice from breaking. Of course, she answered and closed the laptop. Your face is strange. Everything is fine. He didn't answer directly, but handed her the phone with the video turned on. The same one from 3 years ago, where she dances with a stranger in a club. Look, he said. Do you recognize it? Caitlin turned pale, pursing her lips, and quickly looked away from the screen. Where did you get this from? From the network, he answered coldly. Apparently, someone posted it. This is... She raised her eyes to him, full of fear. This is an old recording. Doesn't mean anything. He laughed, but the laughter was bitter and intermittent. Does it mean anything? Seriously. You lied to me 3 years ago about your business trip, but in reality you were at a party with some guy I don't even know by sight, and you obviously didn't just dance. Caitlin closed her eyes and ran her hand over her forehead. Jake, it was one time, one stupid incident. Once, he raised his eyebrows. What about your SM's messages to Rick? Hotel receipts? Dinner for two when you were supposedly in a meeting? He threw several printouts onto the table. Caitlin looked at them like a person who sees a court verdict. Her shoulders were hunched, and she looked lost. You were rummaging through my things, on my phone, and you lied to me for years, he shouted muffledly. I swear to God, I wish I hadn't found any of this. Caitlin stood up, trying to maintain her dignity, but her legs were shaking. Yes, it's my fault, she finally said. I made a lot of mistakes. At some point, I was tired. Of the routine, of the constant demands. I thought it was just a game to help me cope with stress. It had gone too far. How far is it? He hissed, clenching his fists. Have you seen that we are a family? Lucas, Emily. They need a mother, not a man who lies and runs around hotels. I love children, came from her lips. I never wanted to hurt them. It was only my mistake, only mine. Error, he repeated, feeling furious. A mistake is when you break a cup or forget to turn off the iron. What you did was a deliberate betrayal. She clenched her hands, tears glistening on her eyelashes. Tell me what I can do to fix. To correct? His voice broke into a hoarse voice. Do you think you can erase all these years of lies? I have already filed for divorce. The words hit her like a stone slab. She swayed as if struck. Divorce? She exhaled. No, you can't. I can, he snapped. And that's not all. I want the children to stay with me. I will not allow you to take them into your new life. Caitlin tried to catch her breath, looking at him with despair. Jake, you don't understand. They can't do it without me. He laughed again, this time with a terrible, bitter laugh. Come on. And when you went on business trips, what did they do? They were waiting for their mother, who doesn't come to their training sessions or their concerts. I managed on my own. I'll cope further. I want to see the children. Her voice broke mid-sentence, her lips trembling. If the court decides that you can see them, he hissed, then you will. But no cohabitation. From today, you are leaving home. She opened her mouth, trying to object, but his gaze was cold. Go to whoever you want, to your boss, to your friends. I don't care. Just so that by morning you won't be here. Jake, please, let's discuss this tomorrow. There was an attempt at compromise in her voice, but he just shook his head. No, I can't see you here anymore. Pack your suitcase. Caitlin closed her eyes with a heavy breath. She stood motionless for several minutes, then walked past him, carefully pushed his hand away, as if she was afraid to touch him, and went up to the second floor. An hour later, he heard the front door slam and the engine of her car started in the yard. On his way to the window, he noticed a couple of children's toys scattered on the carpet. How will I explain all this to them tomorrow? The thought penetrated him. But he couldn't do anything else now. Any more, and he would have exploded in pain and anger. Standing at the window, he saw the red lights of her car disappearing around the corner. That's it, there's no turning back, he said, feeling that the world around him was shaking, and inside there was only emptiness and ringing silence. In the morning, Jacob got up before the children. He had to explain why his mother was not there and when she would return or not return. But just thinking about it brought bitterness to my throat. While he was preparing breakfast toast with jam and porridge, he was worried about the following thought. What if Caitlin bursts in with an apology or, conversely, with aggression? Will there be a scandal right in front of the children? He wasn't ready for this. When Lucas and Emily came downstairs, the first thing they noticed was that Mom wasn't in the kitchen. Dad, where's Mom? Lucas asked with a strange look on his face. Did she leave for work earlier than usual? Jacob put the spoon aside and gathered his strength. Guys, we need to talk to you. Emily looked at him with her wide eyes. Daddy, what happened? He squatted down to be at Emily's level and hugged her gently. Children, Mom left because she and I have big disagreements. We'll live without her for now. I don't know for how long. Lucas frowned. Did you quarrel? You could say that, Jacob answered wearily, but it's not your fault, remember. Mom still loves you. Will she come back? Emily sobbed, feeling fear squeezing in her chest. Jacob held his daughter close to him, looking at his son over her head. For some time, no. But we will meet, just not all the issues have been resolved yet. Lucas turned away and clenched his fists. Actually, I noticed a long time ago that you don't talk. Why haven't you told us what's going on? Jacob sighed heavily. Sorry, son, sometimes adults themselves don't know how to explain. Soon after this conversation, Lucas retired to his room, and Emily stood lost in the hallway, clutching a soft toy to her chest. Jacob noticed that her eyes were wet. "Do you want me to help you braid your hair?" he suggested, knowing that sometimes little things like that calmed her down. "Yeah," she nodded, smiling timidly. They sat down in the living room, and he carefully began to comb her hair. He remembered how Caitlin used to do this, how they laughed at Daddy's clumsy hands. After that emotionally difficult morning, he decided that it would be better for them all if they moved in with his mother, Mrs. Wilson S.R., who lived a couple of hours away for a while. There was a small rural house there, but with a cozy courtyard and tranquility, which was needed now. He called his mother. "Mom, we need to spend the night with you. Maybe for a few days." There was excitement and love in her voice. "Come, son. There is enough space. I will do everything I can to make you feel at ease." He collected his things, his own, his children's, the necessary textbooks. He told the children that, "We'll go to Grandma's for a while, it's nice there, and she's really looking forward to us." Emily didn't mind much, but Lucas put on his headphones and pretended he didn't care, but was actually depressed. On the way there was silence in the car. There was a pop song playing quietly on the radio that now seemed meaningless. Turning off the highway, they delved into rural spaces, fields, occasional houses. Grandmother greeted them with open arms. She was a short woman with soft wrinkles around her eyes and gray hair tied into a bun. Concern for her grandchildren was visible in her gaze. "My dears, come in," she said, hugging Emily to her and then stroking Luca's head. "I have already prepared lunch for you." "Thanks, Mom," Jacob managed. Walking inside, he felt his soul let go a little. The smell of fresh baked goods and mint tea reminded him of his childhood when all troubles seemed so far away. But the children were still oppressed. Lucas ate in silence and didn't ask any questions. Emily burst into tears at one point when she saw old photo albums where Caitlin was smiling. "I want to go to my mother." She sniffed. Jacob hugged her, reassuring her. "I know, honey. You'll see her soon. Everything will work out, honestly." At that moment, he saw his mother looking at him with sympathy, and from her eyes he understood that she guessed everything, but did not want to ask questions. In the evening, when the children had already gone to bed in a small room with 2 beds, Jacob went out onto the porch and breathed in the cool air. Mom quietly walked up to him and put her hand on his shoulder. "Son, what happened there?" she asked softly. He closed his eyes so as not to burst into tears and had difficulty explaining the situation to her. The mother listened to him, occasionally shaking her head. "I'm very sorry that everything is like this," she said quietly, "but life doesn't end. Your children are wonderful. You can handle everything." "Thank you, Mom," he said in a whisper, feeling that too much pain had accumulated in his chest. They stood in silence, looking at the fireflies flickering in the dark meadow. Perhaps it was a sign that even in pitch darkness, there are sparks of hope. While Jacob and the children were settling into their grandmother's house, everything was rapidly going downhill for Caitlin. She returned to work at Brightwave Media, hoping to escape the routine of projects, only to find the office buzzing with rumors like a hive of bees. She heard someone say behind her, "Have you seen that video? It's obviously Caitlin. It's crazy, and she has 2 children, a husband." When she tried to stop by Richard Cole to talk to him about the situation, his assistant smiled artificially. "Oh, Mr. Cole is very busy. He asked not to disturb him without an appointment. But I can wait. Unfortunately, he has a meeting, then another meeting." Caitlin saw that she was not welcome. People who had previously waved at her in a friendly manner now turned away or looked askance. A couple of days later, she received a letter from the HR department demanding an explanatory note. "The office has received an anonymous complaint of unethical behavior involving a senior employee. We ask you to provide written comments on this matter." Caitlin read this letter with trembling hands. After all, she understood. The complaint was related to her affair with Cole, and the office wanted to survive her so as not to lose her reputation. During one of the breaks, her friend Laura, with whom she had a more or less trusting relationship, approached her. "Kate, are you aware that there are rumors about some kind of lawsuit? Like, your husband is threatening Brightwave because they turned a blind eye to the affair between you and Richard." "Lawsuit?" Caitlin asked, feeling how cold everything inside was. "No, I didn't know." "Be careful. If this is true, the company may make you the last one to save its own skin." Caitlin knew this would happen. An hour later, she was called into the office of Mrs. Grant, the head of HR. There was another man sitting there in a suit, apparently a company lawyer. "Mrs. Wilson," Grant began formally, "unfortunately, our preliminary investigation has revealed facts that may indicate that you are not complying with corporate values and the code of conduct." "But Richard Cole," she began. "Mr. Cole is the leader, and we also have questions for him," the lawyer interrupted her. "But in your case, we see a video already published online where there are hints of intimate behavior. That was 3 years ago. It has nothing to do with work." Caitlin tried to object, but the HR specialist just shook her head. "The company's reputation is important to us. We apologize, but you will have to write an application for leave without pay or consider the option of dismissal by agreement of the parties." Tears came to her throat, but Caitlin held back. Shortly after this conversation, she walked up to Richard's office, knocked, and entered uninvited. He sat in a deep leather chair, and his face was darker than a cloud. "Richard, talk to me," she asked quietly. "Not now, Kate," he snapped, without even looking up from his papers. "But you promised that we would figure it out, that you wouldn't leave me." He sighed heavily and finally looked at her. "Everything has changed, you know. The court, perhaps the press. I can't risk my career because of your problems with your husband." "Your problems?" Her eyes widened. "So these are just my problems, right?" He got up from the table and went to the window, looking at the city lights. "Listen, I'm sorry it happened this way, but we never planned for family happiness. You also knew that this was just a pleasant connection. You're a scoundrel," she whispered, feeling her heart breaking. "If I fall under investigation, I could be fired. I also have a family. I have no choice." He justified himself, as if building a wall between them. Caitlin realized that he was actually abandoning her. Everything that was between them was broken into small fragments. She rushed out of the office, barely holding back her tears. In the corridor, I saw these glances from my colleagues again. Many laughed or whispered sarcastically. "She will be fired soon," she heard a fragment of a phrase spoken behind her. In the toilet, she closed the door to the stall, leaned against the cold wall, and burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. "What have I done with my life?" she thought. "I lost my husband, I'm ruining my family, I'm one step away from being fired." The road home, where she temporarily rented a cheap apartment through a short-term rental service, turned into torture. Every traffic light, every glance of passers-by seemed to be read as condemnation. "Here they are, the consequences," she said out loud, throwing her bag on the floor in the empty apartment. "I destroyed everything myself." Remembering the children, she took out her phone and dialed Jacob's number. He didn't answer. Then she sent a message. "Please let me see the children. I know you're angry, but they are my life." The answer came only an hour later. "Tomorrow after school." We met in the Central Cafe for an hour, and nothing more. There was so much coldness in these short words that she immediately guessed. He was not going to agree to reconciliation. Still, it was a chance to see the children. She sat on the floor, hugging her knees, feeling like she was sinking to the very bottom. "I will fight for them," she decided, but deep down she understood. Now Jacob was well armed legally, and she would have to look for at least the slightest support. But there was no support either from the office or from Richard. The world seemed to her a tiny closed space from which there was no way out. Time passed quickly. Marge Henderson prepared the documents, and within a few weeks the first divorce hearing took place. Jacob arrived early with his lawyer. At the entrance to the courthouse, he was met by a couple of local newspaper reporters. Rumors of a possible lawsuit against Brightwave Media had leaked to the press. Mr. Wilson, how would you comment on the situation with corporate ethics? Questions started pouring in. I'm not commenting on anything, he answered, frowning. Marge smiled coldly at them, and the journalists parted. The judge turned out to be a stately woman of about 45, with collected hair and a tenacious gaze. She invited the parties to present their positions. Marge stood up and began briskly. Your Honor, there is extensive evidence in the case that Mrs. Wilson committed adultery for years, misled her husband, and abused the family's trust. We intend to ensure that the children remain with their father. Caitlin was represented by a young lawyer, perhaps one of those whom she was able to hire for modest money. He looked unsure. My client, he began, adjusting his glasses, admits the fact of personal mistakes, but she is a caring mother. The children need their mother, and we will ask the court to take their interests into account. Yes, we understand that, the judge answered, looking intently at the lawyer. But do you have any specific arguments that the children should stay with their mother, or at least about joint custody? The young lawyer was confused and hesitated, turning over the papers. Marge Henderson instantly caught her opponent's moment of weakness. Your Honor, we ask that temporary measures be taken. Let the children stay with their father for now. We are ready to provide the court with correspondence confirming that Mrs. Wilson has repeatedly neglected her parental responsibilities, preferring to meet with her lovers. The judge gave her a stern look. Mrs. Wilson, sit down. We have heard your position. At the end of the first hearing, the judge announced that the children would temporarily live with their father until the case reached a final decision. Caitlin was allowed to see them on an agreed-upon schedule. I'm trying to maintain a balance in the interests of the children, the judge emphasized. But the situation requires additional investigation. Caitlin looked at Jacob, who stood next to Marge, and there was a bitter plea in her gaze, as if she understood that she was losing ground under her feet. At the end of the hearing, Marge told Jacob, "This is a good start. The court is usually cautious when it comes to custody issues, but we are in a strong position. Anything for the sake of the children," he answered quietly, although in his soul he felt a strange mixture of relief and pain. Journalists were waiting for them at the exit. Marge said briefly, "We are not giving any comments yet." But one of the reporters managed to shout, "Mr. Wilson, are you really suing Brightwave? What do you want to achieve?" Jacob stopped for a moment, turned around, and said quietly, "I want no one else to suffer from their hypocrisy." With these words, he went to the car. Caitlin was the last one to leave the courthouse, her head down. She wanted to say something to Jacob, but he had already left. Her lawyer tried to console her. "Don't give up, Mrs. Wilson. It will be possible to file a petition for temporary cohabitation if we have arguments." But she understood that the arguments were weak. There is not enough evidence of her good behavior, but there is plenty of evidence of cheating. The day ended for her with a visit to the apartment, where she buried herself in the pillows and sat for a long time, looking into emptiness. "How did it happen that I lost both my family and my reputation?" she asked herself, not finding an answer. But in Jacob's mother's house, a different atmosphere reigned. The children returned from school, and grandmother, as always, put hot food on the table. Lucas, however, spent the whole evening sitting at his laptop, barely responding to questions. Emily quietly helped her grandmother roll out the dough, but sighed often. Jacob knew it was not easy for all of them, but it was the best he could do at the moment, provide them with stability and care. Late in the evening, he went out onto the porch and breathed in the cool air, peering into the dark sky. The trial has just begun, there are still hearings ahead, and the fight with Brightwave lies ahead. But at least the first step has been taken, and the children are now safe next to him. His heart sank with sadness, but he reminded himself, "I fight for them." And at that moment something strengthened in him. Perhaps he would find a way to some new happiness, even if he couldn't call his future happy right now. In parallel with the divorce proceedings, Marge Henderson filed a lawsuit against Brightwave Media on Jacob's behalf. The allegations are that the company encouraged, or at least turned a blind eye to, an affair between Caitlin Wilson and her boss, Richard Cole, with devastating consequences for the family and emotional damage for Jacob. Newspapers picked up the news with headlines: Treason and Corporate Ethics, Scandal at a Media Giant, Automotive Engineer Challenges Advertising Corporation. Brightwave immediately counterattacked, declaring that it complies with the highest standards of corporate ethics and that individual employee conduct does not reflect the position of the company. However, when some journalists found photos of Cole and Caitlin apparently getting too close at a corporate meeting, the company's reputation took a hit. They started having problems. One of the large clients suspended the contract until the circumstances are clarified. The company's shares dipped slightly on the stock exchange. For Jacob, this publicity was rather unpleasant. He did not like the hype, did not want to appear in the headlines. But Marge insisted. Such publicity hits them the hardest. Now they will try to reach an agreement so as not to drag out the trial. Perhaps they themselves will offer compensation that will suit us. I don't know, Jacob winced. I'm not chasing money. Think about the children, Marge retorted. These funds can be invested in their future. Meanwhile, real panic began in the Brightwave office itself. HR called an emergency meeting. Richard Cole was temporarily suspended, but so far without public announcement. Cole himself did not show up, holed up in a country house. And rightly so, Marge chuckled. If he gives an interview, he will do even worse. He may blurt out some nuance. Meanwhile, Brightwave's lawyers contacted Marge, trying to settle everything out of court. Caitlin, already removed from work, learned about what was happening only from colleagues who, out of pity, sent her short messages. We are being checked. Lawyers are looking into the issues. Cole denies everything, says that nothing happened during working hours. He's just pretending that we barely know each other, she said into the phone to an old friend, barely holding back tears. But we were together. I know, Kate, my friend sympathized. But now it's to his advantage to cut off the ends. The subpoena also reached Caitlin as a witness. She could shed light on the internal corporate culture. But since she herself was accused by her husband of treason, her testimony could also work against her. Listen, her lawyer friend warned her, if you get called, try not to make things worse, otherwise you won't save the company and you could harm yourself even more. She realized that she was caught between a rock and a hard place. Helping Brightwave meant being a complete liar and admitting to an office romance using her official position. To side with Jacob is to confirm that the company did indeed cover up for her affair. A couple of weeks after the uproar began, Brightwave Media actually offered Marge and Jacob a settlement. At first, the amount sounded like $800,000, then they raised it to $1 million, but with the obligation to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We'll think about it, answered Marge, but the client wants more. She looked at Jacob with a raised eyebrow. Well, do you want us to bargain some more? I don't feel like this is some kind of market, he chuckled. But since they offered, let's raise the bar. As a result, after several rounds of negotiations, the company agreed to $1.2 million with legal costs and without a strict liability clause. Publicity formally, Jacob promised not to disclose the company's trade secrets, but could talk about the fact of his moral compensation. That's how business is done, Marge said, signing the papers. I feel strange, he admitted, as if we sealed the deal and that's it. It's a fair deal, she assured him. You are not looking for benefits, but simply defending your rights. When news of the compromise leaked to the press, Brightwave said it had always been committed to a healthy corporate environment and had conducted an internal investigation with implications for the future. But the reputational blow had been dealt, and some customers still viewed the company with suspicion. Jacob, having received official confirmation of the transfer of money, went to the bank. He looked at the amount in the account, and it seemed something alien to him. I never thought I would find myself in this situation, he thought. Returning to his mother's house, He caught himself thinking that now he had the opportunity to buy a home in a quieter place where the children could start over. But there remained a heaviness in my heart. After all, what is all this about? Because of broken love and trust. However, he reminded himself that he still had a battle ahead in family court. And there, no millions can replace a mother for children and the lost years of marriage for him. He put the keys on the table, sighed, and went to the children who were sitting in the yard. After all, money couldn't fill the void, but the opportunity to start anew, maybe it could. After the first court hearing and the public fuss surrounding the lawsuit against Brightwave Media, Caitlin's life finally went downhill. For another week, she was listed as on leave without pay, hoping that she would quietly sit in her rented apartment and then return to work. But during this time, the company managed to conduct an internal audit. However, everyone understood that this was just a formality. The question was not, will she be fired, but how exactly to formalize this. Every morning she woke up in a cramped one-room apartment that she rented on the outskirts of Detroit. Peeling walls, the smell of dampness. The former comfort of her country house, where she lived with Jacob and the children, was remembered to her as something from another life. At the thought that Lucas and Emily were now somewhere with their father, his heart pounded painfully, as if pressing on his ribs. But she painted herself into this corner. One morning, when she finally dared to check the corporate email, although she was not expecting good news, Caitlin found a letter signed by the head of HR. Topic: Notice of termination of an employment contract. The text stated in formal language, due to non-compliance with corporate values and unprofitable reputational risks for the company, your position, and so on. She reread this paragraph, feeling how everything was shrinking inside. It became difficult to breathe. It seemed that she was drowning in a wave of shame, resentment, and her own powerlessness. That's it, she whispered, dropping her hands on her knees. They threw me out like garbage. She once dreamed of rising to the level of marketing director, then, perhaps, moving to a larger company, working with international clients. And here is the result. She overnight turned into an unemployed woman with a scandalous reputation. Tears welled up in her eyes, but Caitlin quickly wiped them away, as if she was afraid that someone was spying on her in the empty apartment. It's my own fault, she told herself over and over again. The condition was reminiscent of a free fall. Nothing holds, and it is unknown when the impact will hit the ground. Opening her browser, she automatically began to look for vacancies. Marketing manager, Detroit region. But then she remembered how a friend had recently told her, no one will hire you now. The video scandal is too fresh, and you won't get a recommendation from Brightwave. Caitlin took a deep breath and closed her laptop. Then she stood up and walked around the room in a circle, 4 steps there, 4 steps back. Her head was spinning from thoughts about money. Rent had to be paid, the reserves on her card were dwindling, alimony and benefits had not yet been assigned, and Jacob was unlikely to give her anything before the trial. Should she really call Richard Cole and beg for help? But Richard has long been frostbitten, fearing for his own skin. He responded to all her attempts to contact with dry messages, I can't help, or did not answer at all. Deep down, she knew that calling him would mean hitting rock bottom. And why? He has already made it clear that he prefers to save his career by pretending that nothing serious happened between them. In the end, Caitlin, clenching her will, went to the employment site and left her resume there, removing all bright references to Brightwave Media and describing the experience as neutrally as possible. But even this seemed like a useless attempt. All interesting vacancies required recommendations, portfolios, confirmations. She only had scandalous articles in the local media. After several hours of nervously clicking and filling out forms, she felt very tired and went outside. A faded autumn sky, wet asphalt, sparse trees with fallen leaves. She wanted to smoke, although she had hardly smoked before, maybe once a year depending on her mood. But now she bought a cheap pack of cigarettes from a kiosk and lit one with trembling hands, inhaling the bitter smoke. The familiar streets of Detroit, where she once enjoyed walking after work, now seemed alien, People were in a hurry. Everyone had their own concerns. She wanted to scream, "Someone help me! I ruined my life. I don't know what to do." But she was silent. The cigarette ended, the bitterness remained in her mouth, and she threw the cigarette butt into the trash can, taking a deep breath. We have to live somehow. Returning to the apartment, she thought about the children. Taking the phone, she sent Jacob a message. "I'm fired. If you would allow me, I would like to see the children more often. I understand that everything is bad, but I really need them." The answer came late in the evening, short. "You can see each other on Saturday, as agreed. Nothing changes." These words sounded like a sentence. Caitlin dropped her phone on the couch and closed her eyes. It seems like nothing can bring her back to her old life. The next day, realizing that she could not sit within four walls, she went to the City Employment Center. The place had a dreary atmosphere, shabby chairs, brochures about retraining courses, tired clerks behind the counters. She was given several offers. The most acceptable job was in the city library, where a hall employee was needed to help visitors. "The salary is small. The social package is also modest," explained the girl at the counter. "But now the labor market is not very good." Caitlin sighed, but knew there was nothing to choose from. "I sent my resume there, to the library." Leaving the employment center, she felt a pang of pride. "I'm a professional, managed projects, and now, the library? But perhaps this is a chance to at least hide in a quiet place where no one knows about my past." Having made an effort, she went for the interview. The library reading room smelled of old books and dust. She was met by her manager, a woman of about 50, wearing a simple cardigan. She looked at Caitlin kindly, asked about her skills, and learned that she wants to start over. "I didn't ask anything about the Brightwave scandal. Maybe I just didn't know. We value people who love order and documents and know how to get along with visitors," said the manager. "Are you ready to work full-time?" "Yes," Caitlin answered quietly. "I need this." As a result, a couple of days later, they called her and said, "Come to work." The salary was almost 3 times less than what she received at Brightwave, but it was at least some chance to continue living. So she lost one career and received a tiny step towards a new life, albeit not at all the one she dreamed of. While Caitlin was struggling with the consequences of the scandal, Jacob had the opportunity to do what he had long secretly dreamed of: move closer to Lake Michigan, away from the noise of the Detroit suburbs. He always loved nature, water, and space. Now, with a $1.2 million settlement from Brightwave, he could afford to buy a house without taking out a mortgage. Still, the decision was not easy. Staying in the house where she and Caitlin had lived for 15 years seemed unbearable. Every wall, every corner reminded of betrayal. Moreover, he did not want the children to remember every day how their mother left from the same door. Therefore, after consulting with his mother, he contacted a real estate agent. "I ran through several options near Lake Michigan, from luxurious mansions to modest cottages. He chose something in between: a nice house with wooden trim, a large plot, its own pier, and not too pretentious, so that the neighbors would not be jealous." Lucas and Emily were filled with curiosity when they heard about the possible move. "Dad, is there really a lake nearby?" Lucas asked with a sparkle in his eyes. "Yes, 2 steps away," Jacob answered and smiled, seeing the sparkle in his son's eyes. At the same time, he got involved in the tedious procedure of legal registration of divorce. Lawyer Marge was preparing papers on the division of property. The old house where she and Caitlin lived had to be either sold or given to her. But Caitlin was not able to buy out his share. "I can't maintain this house," she admitted through her lawyer. "There is no money for him. There is no work. If Jacob wants it, let him sell it and give some of it to me." Jacob agreed to the sale. The money raised, after paying off the balance of the mortgage and deducting fees, was supposed to be divided equally, but he insisted that part of it be given to Caitlin, not entirely as money, but as a trust for the children. "I don't want her to spend this money on herself or on her entertainment," he told Marge rather harshly. "But I also understand that children should still have financial protection from their mother." The judge approved this solution, considering it reasonable. An account opened in the children's names with a restriction. Caitlin could use the funds only for purposes related to the needs of Lucas and Emily, for example, buying school supplies, paying for clubs. As a result, the old house was put on the market and sold within 6 months. But the deal for a new house by the lake, on the contrary, took place surprisingly quickly. Jacob took this as a good sign. When she and her children first came to view their future home, they immediately felt that this place could become a real new beginning. A green meadow near the porch, old oak trees whose branches almost touched the roof, and a path leading down to the water. "It's so great here," Emily whispered, squeezing her dad's hand. "Let's go swimming, right?" "Of course, when it gets warmer," he answered, looking at the motionless surface of the water. It was autumn, the winds were tearing off the last leaves, the lake was chilling the air. But even in such weather, calm reigned here. Inside, the house turned out to be slightly smaller than before, but with a cozy living room, where the fireplace took pride of place, with a window overlooking the lake. The children got separate rooms on the second floor. Emily admired the view from the window. "Dad, look, I can see ducks from here." Lucas, already more restrained, was also happy in his heart, but asked, "How about the basketball court, Dad? Is there somewhere to play here?" "We'll have to arrange the yard ourselves," Jacob smiled. "I'll put up a shield and a ring, and over time we'll pave the area with asphalt or concrete." The paperwork took another month, but eventually the day came when Jacob officially received the keys. The move turned into a whole quest. A truck, boxes, screams of children who found old toys in distant boxes. Grandma helped pack things, endlessly repeating, "Look, this was your embroidery when you were studying at school." And, "Jacob, what are we going to do with this pile of books?" At some point, he looked back at the pile of things. "How much junk has accumulated over the years in the old house," he thought. Many things reminded me of Caitlin, her winter coats, some souvenirs. He sorted through some of the things, collected them in separate boxes, and called her. "I put something aside here. If you want to pick it up, come," he said dryly. "Thank you," she replied, barely audible. "I'll pick it up." Caitlin arrived at the old house when Jacob was already moving furniture out on a truck. She saw him directing the workers, issuing commands, and Emily was running nearby, clutching a new stuffed dog. When Caitlin approached, the girl froze and then shouted, "Mother," and threw herself on her neck. Caitlin held her daughter tightly to her, watching as Jacob turned away, pretending to be busy with some document. Lucas stood to the side, frowning, but still took half a step closer. "Hi, son," Caitlin said softly. "How are you?" He shrugged. "Fine. My dad and I are moving to a new house." "Is it true?" she asked, pretending that she didn't know. "Great. Will you be happy there?" "We'll see," Lucas muttered and turned away. This scene was short and intense. The workers were carrying boxes and moving furniture into the car. Jacob quickly walked over and pointed out a couple of boxes to Caitlin. "These are the things I put together. Take it." He spoke coldly and matter-of-factly, but there was a mixture of resentment and irritation in his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, and, "Congratulations on your new home. I hope the children will have a good time there." He didn't answer, just nodded. Emily waved to her mom again before disappearing behind the back of the truck. Several more hours of bustle passed, and by evening Jacob, with his children, grandmother, and a bunch of boxes, reached his new house by the lake. Getting used to the new address, they began to unpack their things. Grandma stayed for a couple of days to help settle in, and then promised to return to her place. As the first evening began to fall into deep shadows, Jacob stepped out onto the porch to look out over the lake. A light fog spread over the water. Candle lights could be seen somewhere on the other shore. "Dad," Lucas called quietly, approaching from behind. "Great, right?" "Yes, son," he answered with a slight smile. "This is our new home." Inside, for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had taken the right step. And although the pain from the betrayal did not go away, here, on the shore of the lake, a new chapter of their lives began. Meanwhile, Caitlin, having lost her job and home, tried to get out of a gloomy state, but depression haunted her. Every evening she returned to a lonely apartment, realizing that the children lived in a new cozy house without her. The thought that all this was the result of her own mistakes haunted her. She found a job in the library, just as she had planned. The salary was small, but at least regular. Every day she got up early in the morning, walked to the bus stop, had to sell the car to pay off part of the debts, rode in a half-empty cabin, listening to the roar of engines and observing the gloomy faces of passengers. In the library, she sorted books, helped readers find the publications they needed, and designed cards. In the quiet space of the bookshelves, one could temporarily forget about one's troubles. The smell of dust, the rustling of pages, the occasional whispering of visitors. No one here asked her about her past career or saw the scandalous video. "What is your book?" An elderly reader sometimes asked with a trembling voice, and Caitlin began to decipher their wishes, finding the necessary volumes. Sometimes she thought that it reminded her of old school times when, as a class leader, she helped the librarian sort out old publications. Then she dreamed of great success, of the glitz of office parties, and now, in the end, she returned to her roots. Loneliness turned out to be a difficult test. In the evenings, she bought cheap groceries at the supermarket and cooked simple meals for herself: macaroni and cheese, canned soup. No restaurants, no wine, which I used to treat myself to with Richard. She caught herself thinking that she had never regretted that she had dropped out of the big life. Too much dirt came out, but she regretted how she had ruined her relationship with Jacob and how she had lost the affection of her own children. Soon, having overcome shame, she began attending Sunday church services in a small parish church near her home. She wanted to somehow bring spiritual repentance. Inside the temple, it was cold and quiet. Candles were burning. People were sitting on wooden benches. Some were praying. Some were looking out the window. "Welcome," the priest said one day when he noticed her new face in the crowd. "We always have a place for everyone who is looking for a way." She nodded, at a loss for words. She sat silently, feeling a heaviness in her soul, looked at the images, trying to find the answer to why she allowed such a turn of fate. Some of the parishioners invited her to a mutual aid group where women shared stories of their mistakes and life's ups and downs. She was not ready to tell strangers everything about herself, but the fact of communicating with someone in person gave at least some support. After one such meeting, a modestly dressed woman of about 40 approached her and introduced herself as Karen. "Sorry if it seems intrusive," she said. "I just see that it's hard for you. If you want, we can have some tea and talk sometime." "Thank you," Caitlin answered confusedly, feeling that no one had offered her such simple human support for a long time. With those who knew her from her former life, the connection was almost severed. Friends from the Brightwave office no longer called, fearing that they would get caught in a scandal. Richard Cole once sent a message: "I'm quitting, leaving the state for a while. I hope you don't harbor any grudges." Caitlin read it and deleted it without responding. She realized that she was left alone in the ruins, and now she had to build everything again herself. But how to become a good mother again and earn the forgiveness of your children? The small thread of communication remained short meetings that Jacob allowed. Once a week, usually on Saturdays, she saw Lucas and Emily somewhere in a cafe or park under the supervision of him or her grandmother. At first, the children rushed into her arms, but she noticed how Lucas became more closed, and Emily sometimes cried when parting. "Why can't you come with us?" Emily asked with tears in her eyes. "Because Dad and we need time. We don't live together," she tried to explain softly. "But I love you very much, baby." Sometimes she brought modest gifts to the children, for example, interesting books from the library. But deep down I understood that no gifts would make up for lost time and family warmth. One day, when she once again returned home after a short meeting, she was overcome by a sharp wave of remorse. She sat down at the table, took a pen, and on a regular piece of paper began to write, "Dear Jacob," a letter of apology, an attempt to explain everything that she felt. She wrote that she was not looking for adventure for pleasure, but was trying to fill a void that she herself did not understand, that she loved their family, but somehow missed it all. Sheet after sheet, she poured out her soul, cried, soaking the paper with tears. At the end of the letter, she asked for forgiveness. She didn't ask to come back. She understood that it was too late. She just asked that he would at least someday be able to forgive her for the sake of the children. She placed the letter in the envelope and signed the address, Jacob Wilson, Lake House, which she learned from the children. But then, after hesitating, I decided not to send it. I was afraid that he wouldn't read it anyway. As a result, several such envelopes accumulated in her bedside table, as mute witnesses that she had not lost the remnants of her conscience. In the evenings, covering herself with a blanket, she thought that she had almost no future. But if at least the children know that the mother tried to become better, perhaps there will be a chance. All she had left was quiet remorse and a timid hope that in time it would be possible to restore the bridge between her and her family. On Sundays and quiet evenings in the library, she looked for a way to herself, realizing that the happiness she once had was lost through her own fault. Life in the new house by the lake was moving slowly, but stabilization was beginning to set in for Jacob and the children. They arranged the rooms, and on weekend evenings they roasted marshmallows by the fire and watched the stars. Fortunately, the space allowed. Sometimes friends or Jacob's mother would come over with pies, and the house would be filled with quiet conversations and laughter. But it was far from complete harmony. Lucas continued to be sad about the absence of his mother, and Emily sometimes cried at night, asking why her mother lived separately. Jacob tried to explain that this happens, but he felt a heaviness in his soul, realizing that, as a father, he must take care of their psychological state. Jacob's job as an engineer in a small automobile plant remained a source of stable income. He went to the office once a week, and the rest of the time he could work remotely, since management valued his skills. On one visit to the office, his colleague and friend Mike Reed, a tall man with a friendly smile, came up and said, "Listen, Jake, how do you like the idea of coming to our little barbecue on Saturday? Family event, my sister came to stay. It's her birthday. Yes, it's time for you to unwind." "I'm not sure," Jacob paused, thinking about the children. "Take them with you. We'll have 2 nephews, a bunch of kids of different ages. It'll be fun," Mike continued. Jacob asked Lucas and Emily if they wanted to visit. Lucas shrugged, but Emily perked up. "Dad, I love barbecue." So that Saturday they went to Mike's lawn. There were already tables with salad and lemonade, and someone was playing ball on the lawn. Music boomed from the speaker, and the barbecue smelled pleasantly of smoke and meat. Jacob felt that he was a little worried. It had been a long time since he had been to a friendly meeting where there were strangers. He parked the car on the edge of the site and helped the children get out. Emily looked curiously at the bunch of kids who were playing tag. "Come on," she said, taking Lucas by the hand. He pretended that he didn't really want to, but it seemed that he also didn't mind talking. When Jacob approached the table, Mike called out to him. "Hey, here you are. Meet my sister, Abby. Today is her birthday. She turns 34. The woman standing nearby turned around. She was short, with long brown hair pulled back into a ponytail, wearing a modest dress. She smiled softly, and there was some kind of calm kindness in her eyes. "Hi," she said, a little shyly. "Mike told me that you have 2 children. Where are they?" "Over there." Jacob pointed to the area where Lucas and Emily had already joined the circle of running children. "My name is Jacob. Happy birthday." "Thank you," Abby smiled, a little embarrassed. "Mike is always trying to introduce me to all his friends. I'm from Minnesota and an elementary school teacher. Came to visit for the holidays." "Teacher?" Jacob asked with unexpected interest. "My children are just in elementary school. This is probably not an easy job." "Well, it depends on the class and mood," she laughed. "But I love teaching children. They have amazing minds if you approach them." The conversation went easily. They discussed the weather, the teacher's everyday life, and family matters. Abby mentioned that she had recently completed a course in art therapy, a technique that helps children express emotions through creativity. Jacob, feeling that inside he had not experienced such a calm interest in a woman for a long time, began to talk about his children, about how Emily loves to draw and Lucas loves to play basketball. He did not directly touch on the topic of divorce, only mentioned that he was now raising them practically alone. "It must be hard," Abby said quietly, suddenly noticing a hint of sadness on Jacob's face. "Yes, it can be difficult," he admitted, "but I try my best." At that moment, the children were called to the table, and Emily, laughing, ran up to Dad. At first, she froze when she noticed an unfamiliar woman. "Oh, hello," she said politely. "Hi, I'm Abby," she smiled, crouching down to be at Emily's level. "I'm Mike's sister. Would you like a piece of cake?" Emily nodded. The subsequent barbecue was friendly and fun. Children ran around the lawn, playing tag with other children. The adults talked, drank lemonade, and enjoyed food. Jacob kept finding himself enjoying being around Abby. Her soft voice, calm manner of listening to her interlocutor, some kind of innate tact, all this was conducive to trust. At one point, when dusk had already begun to deepen, she quietly asked, "Do you want me to show you something funny?" "Of course," he responded. She took out several sheets of paper from her bag and began folding them into origami shapes, small cranes. "I often do this with children in my class. It calms you down and develops motor skills. Do you want to try it?" Jacob laughed, awkwardly took the paper, and tried to repeat her actions. It came out crooked, but Abby patiently corrected it. "Here the fold is a little to the left. Look, there's a sharp corner." Soon a whole flock of paper cranes, from white to colored ones, towered in front of them. "It worked," Jacob exclaimed, looking at his unsightly crane. "I never thought I would do this." "You have a good heart," Abby said, looking into his eyes. "Not all men are patient with such little things." For a moment their eyes met, and in those few seconds Jacob felt that he had not felt such a warm light inside for a long time. The barbecue ended, and they exchanged phone numbers just in case. Already in the car, Lucas asked, "Dad, who is this woman you were talking to all the time?" "Mike's sister, Abby," he said quietly, feeling a pleasant wave inside. "She's a teacher." "She's great," Emily added. "She taught me how to make a cricket out of paper." Jacob smiled as he looked in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, looks like she's really cool," he thought, feeling a barely noticeable spark of hope. After the barbecue, Jacob was hesitant to call Abby right away. It seemed to him that this was too bold. He was a single father in the midst of a divorce. She was a guest in the city. But thoughts about her did not leave him. Remembering her smile, voice, paper origami, he felt a forgotten warmth that had been inaccessible for a long time. For several days, he hesitated, scrolling through his options. Maybe I'm moving too fast. What if she's not interested? In the end, I decided that I didn't want to miss the chance. I called. "Abby? Hello, this is Jacob." He heard a joyful intonation on the other end. "Jake, hello. I was just wondering when you would show up." "Well, I'm busy here with work and children." He became embarrassed. "But I'd like to invite you. Maybe we can go somewhere." "With pleasure." "Where exactly?" He suggested. "I live near Lake Michigan. These places are beautiful. Maybe we can take a boat ride, or fishing, if you don't mind." Abby laughed. "Seriously? I've never tried fishing, but it sounds interesting. Just promise me you won't force me to feed the worms." We agreed, he smiled, feeling how everything came to life in his soul. They chose Sunday. He left the children with their grandmother, having agreed that it would only be for half a day. Grandma just smiled slyly. "Go, go, son. You need time for yourself." When Abby arrived, Jacob was standing on the porch with a small folding chair, fishing rods, and a small cooler for bait. He helped her out of the car. A smile lit up her face, and she held a basket in her hands. "I prepared sandwiches and fruit. Suddenly we get hungry." "Great," he nodded. "Then let's go to the pier." The weather was clear, but not too hot. A light breeze blew over them as they walked onto the pier where Jacob had a small motorboat he had bought for the occasion, hoping his children would appreciate it in the future. Abby helped untie the rope. "Well, Captain, full speed ahead," she joked, sitting down on the seat. "I hope the engine won't let you down," he replied, turning on the ignition. The engine started with a slight purr, and the boat smoothly moved away from the shore. They glided along the surface of the water. Green banks overgrown with trees could be seen in the distance. Abby closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "How beautiful it is here, and so calm. In my city, there is always running and noise. I feel like I'm breathing deeply here." "I love it too," Jacob admitted. "When we moved, I had the feeling that I had escaped from all the negativity that had piled up." She glanced at him. "Do you want to tell me more, or would you prefer not to stir things up? I don't want to get into your soul if it hurts you." Jacob was silent for a while, looking at the ripples in the water. Then he exhaled. "My wife. We are getting a divorce. She cheated on me. For a long time, and with several men, including her boss. It was painful." "Sorry for asking," Abby responded quietly, lowering her eyes. "It must be hard for you to go through this." "Yes, but I've already accepted it. The children remain, they are the main thing. It's just that sometimes all this makes itself felt," he said, trying not to give away all the bitterness that still lived inside. They fell silent for a while. The motorboat had moved far enough from the shore that Jacob now turned off the engine. There was an amazing silence, broken only by light waves and the cries of seagulls. "Do you want to go fishing?" he suggested, holding out the fishing rod. Abby looked at the worms in the jar and winced, causing him to laugh. Okay, you can just hold the rod and I'll bait the hook." While they fiddled with line and sinker, she asked him simple questions: how he managed to take care of the children, what he liked to cook, whether he had plans for the future. He answered, feeling how unusually easy it was to open up. "And you," he asked, putting a worm on her hook, "why did you return to Michigan? You're from Minnesota, right? Have you returned?" "Well, I was here before when I visited Mike. Now I'm on vacation. I decided to visit him again. Maybe I'll stay for a month. To be honest, I'm kind of searching for myself," she admitted. "At the school where I work, I am respected, but I feel that I am missing something. Maybe changes, maybe a new environment." "I understand," Jacob nodded. "Sometimes it seems that life has frozen and you want change." They fished in silent concentration. Suddenly, Abby's float twitched and she screamed joyfully. "Oh, I'm biting. What to do?" "Calm down, pull the line smoothly," he exclaimed. She jerked the fishing rod sharply and splashes flew in all directions. To their surprise, there was a small perch on the hook, fluttering around confusedly. "Wow, did I catch that?" She laughed, amazed. "Yeah," he smiled. "But he is very small. We should probably let go." "Of course," Abby said, and carefully removed the fish from the hook, grimacing again when she felt the slippery scales. She released the fish back, and it darted into the water. After fishing, when they were wet from the splashes and had a good laugh, they laid out the sandwiches that Abby had brought. We sat in the boat, swaying slightly on the waves. The conversation turned to the books she read to the children. Abby was excitedly talking about some new story where the hero saves forest animals using his imagination. "You should read this to Emily," she suggested. "There, the main character is a girl, about 7 or 8 years old, who loves nature, draws." "Emily loves to draw," Jacob confirmed. "Maybe we can try it sometime." He caught himself thinking that he was speaking in the form of we, as if he was already suggesting joint plans. Strange, unusual, but he didn't want to stop it. A little later, they started the engine and headed back. Abby helped dock the boat, awkwardly getting tangled in the ropes, and they both laughed again. At the end of the day, when it was time to say goodbye, Jacob looked into her eyes. "Thank you for a wonderful day. I don't remember the last time I felt so alive." "I'm glad we got out, too," Abby answered softly. "Maybe we can do it again sometime." "Definitely," he said, feeling a joyful lightness in his soul. They exchanged a short hug friendly, but with a hint of something more. And in those seconds, he realized that for the first time in many months, he really wanted to move forward. A week after the boat trip, Jacob invited the children to meet a friend he had mentioned in conversation. Lucas furrowed his eyebrows. What other friend? Remember we were at Mike's barbecue? His sister, Abby. We saw her a couple of times later. I want to invite her to visit. Maybe you can make pizza or something else together. Emily clapped her hands. Great. She seems so kind to me. She can do origami too. Lucas crossed his arms over his chest. I don't know. I feel kind of awkward. My mom told me that Dad doesn't need another woman. Jacob felt a painful pang. Of course, Caitlin could instill in the children anything she wanted. Son, let's just get to know each other better. Nothing bad will happen, he said softly. On Saturday, Abby came to them with a paper bag of groceries, fresh vegetables, dough, sauces. She smiled when she saw the children and handed Emily a set of colorful paper sheets. Look, for you and me. I also brought a pizza recipe if you want to try it together. Emily nodded happily. Lucas, standing slightly to the side, did not smile, but looked at Abby carefully. In the kitchen, they began to roll out the dough. Emily played with a small piece, cutting funny shapes out of it. Abby showed her techniques on how to make borders. Lucas quietly helped grate the cheese, sneaking wary glances at Abby. Jacob brought a large bowl and sprinkled flour on the table to keep the dough from sticking. There was laughter in the voices and the bubbling of sauce in the pan. At some point, Emily accidentally dropped a bag of flour, and a white cloud enveloped everyone around. Oh no, she screamed, and Abby laughed, shaking her hair, which was covered with a white coating. Lucas laughed too, watching his dad cough and try to shake himself off. And at that moment, Abby, looking at Lucas, also smiled. Nothing, it's funny. Just think, flour. Let's get back to the pizza. Lucas nodded, and a spark of curiosity appeared on his face. He seemed to be expecting some kind of stern shout from her, as he usually did from teachers, but received a calm reaction. While the pizza was baking in the oven, Abby suggested doing some origami. Emily was delighted, and Lucas at first grumbled that it's girly, but then he got involved when he found out that you can make airplanes and even mechanical bugs out of paper. So, for an hour, under quiet music and the aroma of pizza, they sat at the dinner table. The children enthusiastically folded the figures, and Abby talked about her students who, at Lucas' age, could already make complex structures if they were taught correctly. As a result, when the pizza was ready, everyone went to the living room and sat down at the wooden table. Trying the homemade result, Emily sighed with pleasure. How delicious, Abby smiled. The secret is in the good sauce and the mood of the cook. Lucas broke off a piece of crust and asked directly, looking at her, Are you and your dad sort of dating? There was a short pause. Jacob glanced sideways at Abby, slightly embarrassed. Honestly, we're just friends, Abby answered softly, without losing her goodwill. I like your dad. He is a very good person. But we are in no hurry. Lucas frowned as he replayed her words. Apparently, he decided that the answer was acceptable. He nodded, took another bite of the pizza, and didn't ask any more questions. Jacob felt grateful to Abby for being so careful to find words that didn't hurt the children or make false promises. They spent the rest of the evening in the garden, where Jacob had recently begun setting up a small court. He placed a basketball hoop on a pole and strung up a badminton net. Abby suggested playing 2 on 2 inches, she and Emily against Jacob and Lucas. It was fun. They threw the ball, ran, and laughed. Lucas tried to show off his skills by throwing some good shots, while Emily happily jumped and waved her arms. Abby, although not a professional, enthusiastically tried to resist Lucas's pressure. As the sun began to set, Abby invited the children to make paper lanterns and light small lead candles in them. She brought them in her bag. The result was almost magical. At dusk, small luminous figures were placed across the lawn, flickering like fairy lights. What a beauty, Emily whispered. Even Lucas, usually reserved, said, it turned out great. By the evening, when Abby was getting ready to leave, the children were already looking at her without the same wariness. Emily even asked, "Come again, please. We can try baking a pie or, well, at least pancakes. I'll definitely come," Abby promised. She said goodbye to Jacob on the porch. They exchanged a quiet glance, and he felt a warm excitement inside. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," he said. "The children liked you." "It's mutual," she smiled. "Your house is very cozy." She drove away, and Jacob watched her go. For the first time in a long time, he felt hope that their family hearth could find new form and warmth, despite all the past wounds. Another month has passed. Jacob and Abby's relationship became warmer, although they tried not to rush or force things. The children perceived her presence better and better. Emily already called her girlfriend, and Lucas sometimes asked Abby to help with some school project. She could explain how to correctly draw pictures or make a model of a volcano. Meanwhile, Jacob and Caitlin's divorce was reaching its final stage. The court was soon to make a final decision on custody and division of property. Despite the fact that the legal issues were almost resolved, a bitter feeling remained. One quiet evening, when the children had already gone to bed, the doorbell rang. Jacob, tired after work, at first did not understand who could arrive so late. He opened it and was stunned. Caitlin was standing on the threshold. She looked exhausted, pale face, tired eyes, a coat on her shoulders, and her hands were shaking from the cold. "Hello," she said quietly. "Sorry it's late, but I needed to see you." Jacob was silent for several seconds, not knowing what to answer. Finally, he stepped to the side, indicating that she could enter. A painful feeling rose in his chest. He did not want the children to wake up and find their mother. "The children are sleeping," he said dryly, closing the door. "What's happened?" "Nothing special. I just missed them. I wanted to know if I could see them, at least for an hour." "It's almost 10 o'clock in the evening," he noted. "Maybe tomorrow?" She lowered her head. "Tomorrow I have a shift at the library." Then a circle of worries. "Jake, I understand that you have every reason not to let me in. It's hard for me." He felt a pang of conscience. I saw that she was on the verge of tears. Involuntarily, he softened. "Look, I don't want you to disturb their sleep, but you can go into the living room and we'll talk a little." Caitlin nodded and followed, awkwardly looking around as if seeing the house for the first time. She had never had the opportunity to be here. Everything changed after their breakup. They sat on the sofa under the dim light of the floor lamp. On the table were the remains of plates from dinner, a child's drawing that Emily had left. Caitlin took it in her hands and swiped her finger across the colored pencils. "Did Emily draw this? Such a good guy." "Yes," he answered briefly. She took a deep breath as if gathering strength. "I saw a lawyer today. It looks like the court is about to give you full custody and limited time for me. It's only fair after everything I've done. But," the voice trembled, "they are my children too. I just want to be able to be there, to help in some way." Jacob clenched his fists, trying to hold back the surging pain. "Yes, these children are hers too," he admitted to himself. "But how to forget the betrayal that destroyed their family? You already see them on schedule," he reminded me. "Do you want more often?" "Yes," she nodded. "I'm ready for any conditions. At least sit next to me while they do their homework. Or walk in the park under your supervision. I just can't live without them." He was silent, examining her face. She looked genuinely remorseful. But could he trust her after all the lies? "Do you promise not to make a scene, not to try to interfere with my decisions?" He asked with emphasis. "Don't interfere in our lives with the children." "Yes," she whispered. "I'm not trying to return everything to the way it was. I understand this is unrealistic. I just want to be a part of children's lives." Jacob sighed. "Children need their mother, at least partially," he recalled the psychologist saying. "Fine, I will try to give you more time. But keep in mind that we have our own life here, our own rules. And," he paused, "I have a woman I'm dating. The children know her, they like her." Caitlin winced as if she had been stabbed by a needle, but she nodded anyway. I heard something like this. A friend reported that you were seen with someone. I have no right to interfere. On this painful note, they agreed. She would be able to visit or meet with the children a little more often, but only with the consent of Jacob. As she stood up to leave, she glanced around the living room. It's cozy here, she said, smiling with difficulty. You did everything to make them feel good. I tried, he answered briefly. At the door, she turned around. Thank you for listening. And, forgive me. I know that you threw away all my letters if they arrived, but I sincerely. He raised his hand, stopping her speech. Not now, Caitlin. Just go away. She nodded silently and walked out into the night. Jacob closed the door behind her and stood in the corridor for a long time, feeling old wounds tearing inside. Yes, he accepted her repentance, but the pain did not disappear. In the end, he realized that life still moves forward, and perhaps allowing Caitlin to see the children more often is the right thing to do, if only for the sake of the children themselves. But inside, he thanked fate for the fact that he had a future in which its influence was no longer so strong, and there might be Abby nearby, whom he did not want to lose because of the ghosts of the past. Over time, Jacob and Abby's relationship developed naturally and harmoniously. She regularly came to their house, helped the children with their homework, brought interesting books, taught them how to make new origami, now complex figures, frogs that could jump, boxes in which they could put gifts. Lucas became more and more relaxed, began to laugh and joke, and Emily sometimes asked if Abby could stay the night to play some more. Abby smiled shyly and promised to return the next day. Gradually, her things began to appear in the house. A recipe book, several warm sweaters, even a set of watercolors for Emily, but in fact they used them together. Jacob noticed that he liked her presence. He felt joy when she was around. Several times she spent the night with them when the children went on vacation to their grandmother, or, conversely, when they were at home, but were already accustomed to the fact that Dad and Abby could wake up together. There were no scandals, everything went smoothly and almost imperceptibly. There were no more surprised questions from friends and relatives. Everyone saw that Jacob, after a difficult breakup, finally found happiness in communicating with a kind and sincere woman. Even Jacob's mother, always cautious about her son's new hobbies, once said, "Abby is a wonderful girl. I'm glad you're together." Amid all this, Jacob began to think that perhaps they were ready to take a more serious step. Although the fear of a new marriage was stirring somewhere inside, what if there is betrayal again? What if the pain comes back? But every day around Abby convinced him of the opposite. She was a person capable of honesty and compassion. He was spinning the idea of proposing in his head, but didn't know what moment to choose so as not to scare her with his speed. In the end, I decided to wait until the anniversary of their acquaintance. A little more than a year had passed since that barbecue at Mike's, and Jacob had a plan to have a romantic evening on the lake. He told the children about his idea, and Emily was delighted. Lucas nodded like a man, saying, "If you want to propose to her, Dad, I support it. She's awesome." "Thank you, son," Jacob replied, barely hiding his excitement. He prepared the boat for the evening, decorated it with small battery-powered lanterns, and grabbed a bottle of wine and light snacks. When Abby arrived, he asked her to close her eyes, led her to the pier, and helped her get into the boat. "What's happening?" She laughed. "Be patient a little," he replied, starting the engine. They set sail, and when they reached the middle of the lake, where the waves were almost invisible, he turned off the engine. A light twilight began to envelop the water. The lanterns on the sides of the boat flickered with yellow light. "Open your eyes," he said. She opened it and gasped. All around is an endless expanse. In the distance is a sunset shining in pink and purple hues. The boat glows with festive lights, and he takes a small velvet box out of his pocket. "Abby," Jacob began, feeling his heart pounding, "you have been a true gift in life to me. I didn't expect that after everything that happened to me, I would be able to trust and love again. But you restored my faith." Abby looked at him, eyes wide, lips parted. He opened the box. Inside was a thin ring with a small diamond. "I want us to be a family," he said, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "I know that I already have 2 children, but they adore you, and so do I. Do you agree to marry me?" She covered her face with her hands for a moment, and he was afraid that she would cry or be afraid. But then I saw a wide smile appear through her tears. "Yes," she said quietly, and a smile lit up her whole face. "Yes, Jake, I agree." He put the ring on her finger, and at that moment her heart almost jumped out of her chest with happiness and excitement. They hugged, her tears flowed down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I love you very much," he whispered in her ear. "And I you," she answered. "Thank you for finding me." Then they sat in the boat for a long time, hugging each other, watching the sunset give way to the evening lights on the shore. Returning to the pier, they found Emily and Lucas on the pier, deliberately peeking from behind a tree. When the children realized that everything had gone well, they ran out and hugged Abby, rejoicing. Lucas even patted her on the shoulder and said, "Welcome to the family." Abby smiled at them through her tears of happiness, and Jacob, feeling true calm bliss blooming inside, was grateful to fate for this gift, which happened to him in the most difficult times. Preparations for the wedding began almost immediately. Abby, who did not like pompous ceremonies, proposed a modest celebration on the lake. No banquet halls and hundreds of guests, only close people. Jacob readily agreed, knowing that even though this was his second marriage, he wanted to do everything with warmth. Emily volunteered to be a flower girl scattering petals. Lucas agreed to carry the rings. Grandma happily offered to bake a cake. Mike was going to bring some friends on guitar, so there would be live music. Of course, thoughts arose. What if Caitlin wants to show up? Technically, it was open air, but Jacob was not going to invite her, knowing that it could ruin the whole atmosphere. Abby would also be embarrassed if the groom's ex-wife showed up there. In the end, it was decided not to tell Caitlin anything directly. If the children themselves say so, then so be it, but there will be no official invitation. It was a clear summer day when several simple decorations were set up on the shore of the lake. An arch with fresh flowers, benches for guests, a table with snacks. The weather was pleasant with warm sun and a light breeze, and from the shore there was a view of sparkling water. Lucas looked a little embarrassed in the suit, but tried to act like an adult. Emily, in a light dress with a basket of petals, was all innocence with a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. When Abby walked out to the archway in a simple white dress with only a little lace, Jacob's breath caught in his throat. Her hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and she wore a wreath of wildflowers on her head. His eyes shone with such happiness that he seemed ready to cry with joy. The ceremony was short but touching. Friends said a few kind words. Jacob's mother expressed a blessing. Mike and his friends quietly played a lyrical melody on guitar. When the time came to say the vows, Abby took the microphone and said quietly, "Jake, I'm grateful to fate for bringing me to you. I promise to be there, to share joy and difficulties with you. I already consider your children a part of my heart. I am ready to keep our love and take care of our home." He, feeling a slight lump in his throat, answered, "Abby, you came into my life at a time when I lost everything, and with her light, she showed me that there is hope and love. I promise to always support you, take care of you and our common future." Next to the arch stood Lucas and Emily, who looked at them with beaming faces. Emily periodically threw petals from the basket, and Lucas held a cushion with rings. Jacob took the ring and carefully placed it on Abby's finger, and she did the same for him. "I declare you husband and wife," solemnly said the friend witness, who received the right to conduct the ceremony. Amid applause, the guests began to hug the newlyweds, smile, and laugh. Mike played a more cheerful tune, and someone started dancing right on the sand. The celebration was casual. They enjoyed snacks and drank homemade lemonade and wine. Children played, ran, splashed at the water's edge. Adults relaxed on folding chairs. In the evening, several torches were lit, and Jacob and Abby slowly danced to the music of a small ensemble. At that moment, in the light of the torches, He saw her face, full of love, and felt that his heart was finally finding long-awaited peace. Shortly before sunset, a courier suddenly appeared from behind the trees with boxes. He asked, "Are Emily and Lucas Wilson here? A package for them?" It turned out that these were gifts from Caitlin, soft toys and a note. "My dears, with love from Mom. Be happy." Jacob sighed. That means she found out after all. He looked at the children. Emily clutched the toy to her chest, and Lucas frowned, but took the second one. "Dad, Mom knows that you have a wedding, right?" he asked quietly. "Apparently, yes," Jacob replied, "and I decided to convey my congratulations to you in this way." Some echo of bitterness stirred inside him, but he thought, maybe this is her way of saying goodbye to the past and wishing us happiness. Abby walked over and gently touched his shoulder. "Everything is fine." "Yes," he said, exhaling. "I'm glad that the children received a sign of attention from her." She nodded, understanding without words that this was a difficult moment. The evening ended near the fire when the stars scattered across the sky. The small group stayed by the water, and Jacob, hugging Abby, watched as Emily was nodding off, falling asleep in her grandmother's arms, and Lucas was quietly talking to Mike about some teenage things. "Now we have our own family," Abby whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Yes," Jacob answered, "a family that we will build on trust and love." And at that moment he felt that, despite all the scars, life could give a second chance. They just need to not miss it. After the wedding, life gradually returned to normal. Abby officially moved in with Jacob, continuing to work as a remote teacher, and found an online education program while looking for a permanent school near the lake. The children were getting used to their new status as Abby's mom, although no one forced them to call her that. They still saw their mother, Caitlin, who visited them from time to time. The court made a final decision. Custody was transferred to Jacob, but Caitlin has the right to regular visits. The house was sold, and some of the money went into a trust in the children's names. The divorce was officially announced in local newspapers, but the fuss has long died down. Caitlin, who remained in the modest apartment, continued to work in the library. Her life became modest, almost ascetic. In the morning work, in the evening a cup of tea, books, sometimes church on Sundays. She saved part of her salary in order to somehow help her children. She tried not to complain, taking it as atonement for her mistakes. She once lived in style expensive dresses, restaurants. Now I was glad that I could go to the park, feed the pigeons, and think about the future. On Saturdays, when she met with Lucas and Emily, they talked about how good they were at home, how Dad and Abby taught them new things together, how they fished or went for walks. Caitlin was sincerely happy, although inside she felt a pang of envy and longing. She herself could have lived like this if it had not been for the betrayal. "Mom, do you want us to make origami together?" Emily once asked, shining with her new skills. "With pleasure, dear," she replied, sitting down next to him and looking at the neat folds of the paper. When the origami was ready, Emily said, "You know, Mom, Abby taught us to do these things, but I want you to be able to do it too." Caitlin felt tears welling up, but held them back. "Of course, I'll learn. Thanks for showing me." At such moments, she felt the acute pain of realizing that the role of Jacob's wife and partner was now being filled by another woman. But she understood. This is the reality that she herself created. Over time, she and Jacob developed a polite, neutral relationship. They communicated about the children and coordinated their schedules. Sometimes she would come into the house if someone was sick and needed help. Abby treated her fairly, without aggression, and this created a tolerant microclimate for the sake of Lucas and Emily. "Thank you for taking care of them," Caitlin once told Abby when Emily caught a cold. "You're really good for them." "They are wonderful children," Abby replied with a warm smile. "I'll do everything I can." So, two paths took shape in their destinies. Caitlin was quiet and modest. She spent her free time growing flowers in pots on the windowsill, reading books, and sometimes helping in the church community. No noisy parties, expensive clothes, she couldn't even afford a car yet. but she didn't complain. Jacob has a new, full-fledged family. In the evenings, they played board games, discussed the children's homework, and made plans for vacation. Sometimes on weekends, we went to other lakes, where we fished together, fried marshmallows, and laughed. Lucas and Emily were growing up. Lucas was already a tall teenager and was on the school basketball team. Emily continued to enjoy drawing and also started the habit of keeping a diary where she wrote down her thoughts and pasted in small origami figures. Jacob felt a quiet pride as he watched them. He hugged Abby one evening on the pier, looking out at the water. "Our children are so amazing, aren't they?" "Yes," she smiled, "and this is just the beginning of their journey." One day, on the eve of Emily's birthday, Caitlin walked up to the lake house with a bouquet of flowers and a cake. When she saw the whole family, Jacob, Abby, Lucas, Emily, and a couple of friends sitting on the veranda and laughing, a feeling of relief suddenly flashed through her heart. They are happy. She handed Emily gifts, she threw her arms around her neck and thanked her. Jacob offered tea, and they all sat at the table together in one circle, despite past dramas. There was slight awkwardness, but no one fell into gloomy memories. "Thank you for coming," Jacob said quietly as she prepared to leave. "Thank you for letting me in," Caitlin replied, trying to smile. Thus a strange calm arose when everyone found their shore. Caitlin is in silence and modest work, but with a preserved love for children. Jacob is in a new marriage where there is trust and joy. Two destinies that diverged after one fateful video have finally found balance. In the evening, looking out the window at the lake, Jacob thought, "This is life. Everyone has their own mistakes, their own redemptions, their own chances. I have found my happiness, and I don't want to regret anything." And Caitlin, watering the flowers on her windowsill, looked at their buds with quiet humility. Once she was drawn to the bright lights of parties, but now she rejoiced at every petal, every weekend spent with her children. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.